Tonight, as in the past few days, Bill O'Reilly has devoted large sections of his shows to defending himself against critics who pointed out the racism in his surprise that people in a black-owned restaurant know how to order iced tea without cursing about somebody's mother. Mr. O'Reilly has again questioned why no one is addressing the context of his remarks, which is confusing to some degree, given that he has refused to play the recording of those remarks with or without full context on his own show. For people other than O'Reilly, the primary question has been whether he knew what he said was racist, but in our #1 story tonight, it's time to consider another question. Is Bill ill? Not to equate racism with mental defect, although the argument can be made, but last night Mr. O'Reilly demonstrated some classic signs of paranoia and an inability to distinguish between the rest of the world and the contents of his own head. It began with his litany of wrongdoers.
Besides CNN, the worst offender in this case is the New York Daily News, the CBS Early Show, which actually described Media Matters as a watchdog group. How dishonest is that? The Chicago Sun-Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, ABCNews.com, and the Louisville Journal also completely distorted the story.
In Mr. O'Reilly's defense, not everyone is apparently out to get him. He credited sympathetic coverage from one TV program, one newspaper, and a guy.
The following outlets were fair: The Today Show, Newsday, and Stephen Smith of ESPN.
By the way, when you're down to Stephen A. Smith, you're finished. Tonight, he pleaded with Jesse Jackson to condemn CNN, and those fair journalists did not stop him from extrapolating that because of how his remarks have been quoted, the news media, all of it, every single practitioner of journalism in every medium in the United States of America can no longer be trusted.
The tragedy here is that there is no longer an honest press in America. Americans should be very skeptical of the news media. No longer can it be trusted.
We haven't trusted you in 10 years. Then today he took it to the next logical step, and by logical I mean vague, mumbled threats of retribution from the King Lear of Levittown.
These people aren't getting away with this. I'm going to go right where they live. Every corrupt media person in this country is on notice right now. I'm coming after you. I'm going to hunt you down. And I mean it. The smear stops here. You're all on notice out there. I'm coming for you.
Let's turn now to an authentic O'Reilly biographer, Marvin Kittman, who interviewed the man 29 times for his book, The Man Who Would Not Shut Up. And we should point out his many favorable things to say about Mr. O'Reilly in that book. And also, as a disclaimer here, has also written an embarrassingly nice cover story about me in the current issue of The Nation. Marvin, good evening.
Good evening. Boy, you're really scaring me with that list of things that O'Reilly's going to do to us.
Yes, I know. I'm going to wear a helmet from now on. Listen, I want to quote from this, your blog on the Huffington Post, your column, and there's a blank in here. Fill in the blank for me. When I began studying him, O'Reilly, he was a semi-demented TV newsman, but lately he seems to be blanking it. Please fill in the blank.
To use the technical word, losing it. He seems more unhinged than usual. You know, you can tell in his debates, for example, he has two people that are debating an issue when we're lucky, but even when somebody is on his side, if they're slightly off, like 1 degree, he comes down on them, and he's just about ready to implode, I can see looking at him. And he has a tendency, as you pointed out, he seems to have a case of paranoia. Everybody is against him, which is, you know, I guess partly true. And he has an increased tendency now to make mistakes. He always seems to be putting his foot where his mouth belongs. And the most recent example, of course, is at his debut as a restaurant critic at Sylvia's in Harlem. And I would like to say that I have analyzed his problem as he has a case of Achilles' mouth.
Now, this defense, which we hear a lot, but in this case, he's used it to the extreme and repeatedly, I was taken out of context. Would it not make sense to play the whole tape of the comment, which was on radio, about this restaurant, Sylvia's Restaurant, and the clientele and the ownership? Wouldn't it make sense to play it in full context on the television show that you own and operate, or is he afraid to do that, or what's the psychology there, do you think?
What you don't understand, Keith, is the context may be worse than the excerpts of it, and he would look even more unhinged if you actually heard what he was saying. What I was amazed about that, his going to Sylvia's restaurant, that he actually went to a restaurant. You know, he doesn't go out very much. One, he's afraid people are going to get him, they're after him. Secondly, he's very cheap. And he's the most awesomely frugal person in the history of TV journalism. You know, I had 29 interviews with him, and he never once would go out to lunch or dinner with me. And it's not only me, but he makes $50 million a year, and when he takes out his friends, they all split the check. And so that was one of the great things about him.
The untold story of Sylvia's. He bought. Listen, unlike the Imus case last spring, there seems to be less outcry at this time, at least at this time. Maybe there would be later. But is there a confirmation in that society at large understands there's some sort of diminished capacity here and has no expectation of morality from him or from the people he works for? Or why the different reactions?
Well, that's one way to look at it. If there was a basketball team involved, it might have been different. And it is food that they're talking about in restaurants. And I just think that Imus is considered much more of a threat to society than Bill O'Reilly. And, you know, Keith, I don't have much time here, but I do want to say that you are responsible for contributing to O'Reilly's seeming to be unhinged. By your mentioning him all the time, you're making a star out of him. You know, he lives for media attention. It is spinach. You know, he's like Popeye, and he has to get involved with some network or some newspaper column or some book, and you're doing it. I should point that out to you. You might not be aware of it.
It's been brought up a couple of times in a couple of places. I guess we're going to have to leave the question of what we can do to help in his time of crisis.
He has, I think he's on the verge of having a breakdown. I think he needs psychiatric help. And of course, he told me that he would never pay a psychiatrist money to listen to him. And I would suggest we have a telethon in his honor to raise money.
Marvin Kittman, the author of The Man Who Would Not Shut Up, The Rise of Bill O'Reilly. Great thanks for being our Sherpa guide as we go inside the big giant head of Bill O'Reilly.
Thank you.